I boarded the first flight home after 5 years because my half-sister texted that Mom was sick and asking for me. I shouldn't have believed her. The second I walked through that door, my stepfather Frank grabbed me by the throat and slammed me against the wall, screaming that I had some nerve showing my face after abandoning the family. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway and said nothing. My sister Brittany filmed it on her phone, laughing. That's when I realized the truth. They didn't want me home to reconcile. They wanted me home to punish. But what they didn't know was that I didn't come back as the scared 17-year-old girl they threw out. I came back as the woman who owned the building their favorite restaurant operates in, and I was about to foreclose. I should have known better than to come back. But hope is a dangerous thing when you've spent your entire childhood begging for crumbs of love from people who saw you as nothing more than an inconvenience. My name is Maya Richardson, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the family you're born into isn't your family at all. Sometimes your real family is waiting for you on the other side of courage. It started with a text message from Brittany, my half-sister. We hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since the night I turned 17, and my stepfather Frank told me to get out and never come back. The text was short and urgent. Mom is sick. Cancer. She keeps asking for you. Please come home. I stared at that message for 3 hours on my phone while sitting in my corner office in downtown Seattle, the city lights reflecting off the glass like stars I could almost touch. I'd built a life here, a real life. I was 27 years old, and I'd just closed a deal that would make me a multimillionaire before my 30th birthday. I had friends who actually cared about me. I had a therapist who helped me understand that what happened to me wasn't normal. I had healed. But the girl inside me, the one who used to hide in her closet when Frank came home drunk, the one who used to pray every night that maybe tomorrow Mom would choose her instead of him, that girl never really left. She whispered in my ear that maybe this was my chance. Maybe Mom was finally ready to see me. Maybe she was finally ready to apologize. Maybe dying changes people. So I did the stupidest thing I've done in 5 years. I booked a flight to Portland and rented a car to drive to the small town in Oregon where I grew up. Where I survived, really. Growing up is something you do with love and support. Surviving is what you do when you're on your own. The flight was only an hour and 40 minutes, but it felt like traveling back in time. Every mile closer to that house was a mile closer to the girl I used to be, the girl who wasn't good enough, the girl who was too loud, too quiet, too much, not enough, the girl who got blamed for everything that went wrong in that house, while Brittany, the golden child, could do no wrong. I gripped the steering wheel of my rental car so hard my knuckles turned white as I drove through town, past the high school where I'd eaten lunch alone every day, past the diner where I used to work double shifts to save money for college, past the library where I'd hidden from the world in the pages of books about girls who escaped their circumstances and became something more. Their house looked exactly the same, small, tired, with peeling paint, and a lawn that Frank never quite got around to mowing properly. My Mercedes looked absurd, parked in the driveway next to Frank's rusted pickup truck and Brittany's hand-me-down sedan. I sat in the car for 10 minutes trying to breathe, trying to remember all the affirmations my therapist Dr. Chen had taught me. You are worthy. You are enough. Their treatment of you was about them, not you. You survived and you thrived. You don't need their validation. But God, I wanted it anyway. I wanted my mother to look at me and say she was sorry. I wanted her to say she should have protected me. I wanted her to choose me just once. I finally got out of the car and walked to the front door. My hand shook as I rang the doorbell. I heard voices inside, movement, and then the door swung open, and there was Brittany. She looked different, harder somehow. She was only 23, but she looked older than me, like life hadn't been kind to her either. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knows something you don't. Come in, she said. They're waiting for you. That should have been my first warning. The way she said waiting, like I was expected, like this was planned. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me immediately. That mixture of cigarette smoke and cheap air freshener that I'd spent 5 years trying to forget. The house was messier than I remembered, dishes piled in the sink, stacks of mail on every surface. The carpet was stained and worn. This was the house where I'd learned to make myself invisible, where I'd perfected the art of being so quiet that maybe they'd forget I existed and stop finding reasons to hurt me. Mom appeared from the hallway, and my heart jumped. She looked fine, not sick, not dying, not frail. She looked exactly the same as she did 5 years ago when she stood silent while Frank threw my belongings onto the front lawn and told me I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything, that I was just like my deadbeat father who'd left before I was born. "Mom," I said, my voice small and uncertain, "you look good. Where's the cancer?" She didn't answer. She just looked past me toward the kitchen, and that's when I heard the heavy footsteps. Frank emerged from the shadows like a monster from my childhood nightmares. He was a big man, 6'3", and 240 pounds of rage that he'd spent my entire childhood taking out on me because I wasn't his daughter, because I was a reminder that his wife had a life before him, because I existed, and he resented every breath I took. He walked straight toward me, and I froze. That old familiar freeze response, the one where your body remembers every time you tried to fight back, and it only made things worse, so you learned to go still and silent and small. Before I could speak, before I could run, before I could do anything, his hand was around my throat, and he slammed me against the wall so hard I saw stars. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. His face was inches from mine, and I could smell the beer on his breath. "You've got some nerve showing your face here after you abandoned this family," he snarled. "After everything we did for you, feeding you, housing you, and you just disappear for 5 years without a word?" I tried to speak, but his hand was crushing my windpipe. I couldn't breathe. I clawed at his hand, and that's when I heard it. Laughter. Brittany was laughing, and when I managed to turn my head slightly, I saw she had her phone out. She was filming this. She was filming him choking me, and she thought it was funny. Frank finally released me, and I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. My throat burned, my vision swam, and my mother who I'd flown here to see, who was supposedly dying of cancer, who'd supposedly been asking for me, just stood there in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed. She didn't tell him to stop. She didn't rush to help me. She didn't say a single word. That's when I understood with perfect clarity. There was no cancer. Mom wasn't sick. This was a setup. They'd lured me back here to punish me for having the audacity to leave, for having the audacity to survive without them, for having the audacity to not come crawling back begging for their approval. I pulled myself up, using the wall for support. My legs shook, but I forced myself to stand. "Why?" I whispered, looking at my mother. "Why would you do this?" She finally spoke, and her voice was cold. "You embarrassed this family when you left, Maya. You made us look bad. People talk. They say we must have been terrible parents for you to run away like that. You owed it to us to come back and make things right." "Make things right," I repeated slowly. "I was 17. Frank told me to get out. You let him. You watched him throw my clothes on the lawn, and you did nothing. I had nowhere to go. I slept in my car for 2 weeks until I could save enough from my job to rent a room." Brittany spoke up then, still holding her phone, still recording. "You always were so dramatic, Maya, always playing the victim. Frank was trying to teach you responsibility, and you turned it into this whole big thing. You could have apologized and come back any time. You chose to stay away. You chose to abandon us." I stared at her, at this woman who'd been given everything I'd been denied. The love, the support, the belief that she mattered. She had no idea what it was like to be the scapegoat, to be blamed for everything wrong in Anne or a family's life, to serve as the emotional punching bag so that everyone else could feel better about themselves. And she never would. Golden children never understand what they have because they've never known anything different. I should have left right then. I should have walked out that door and never looked back. But I needed them to understand what they'd done. I needed them to know that their cruelty hadn't destroyed me. So I took a breath, touched my bruised throat, and I started talking. "I'm not here to make things right with you," I said quietly. "I came because I thought Mom was dying, and I thought maybe she wanted to apologize. I thought maybe after all these years she'd realize that she failed me, that she chose an abusive man over her own daughter, that she stood by and watched while he destroyed my childhood. But I can see now that none of you have changed. None of you have grown. You're all still stuck in the same toxic patterns, blaming me for your misery instead of looking at yourselves." Frank stepped toward me again, and I held up my hand. "Don't touch me again. I'm not 17 anymore, Frank. I'm not the scared little girl you could push around." Frank sneered. "Oh, so 5 years in the big city made you tough? Made you better than us? Where do you even work? Some retail store? Some waitress job? Let me guess, you're barely scraping by and you came back hoping we'd help you out." I smiled then, a real smile, because this was the moment I'd been unconsciously waiting for, the moment where I got to show them exactly how wrong they were about me. "I work in commercial real estate investment," I said. "I own a portfolio of properties worth $42 million. I have a penthouse in downtown Seattle. I drive a car that costs more than this house. And do you know what the funny thing is, Frank? Do you know what the absolutely hilarious thing is?" He stared at me, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and opened my business portfolio app. I turned the screen toward him. "That Italian restaurant you and Mom go to every Friday night? Salvatore's? The one where you get the corner booth and order too much wine and complain about the prices? I own the building it operates in. I bought it 8 months ago. The owner is 3 months behind on rent. I've been lenient because I didn't realize the connection until about 2 weeks ago when I was reviewing files and saw photos of the property and recognized the street. But now I'm going to foreclose. Salvatore's will be shut down by the end of the month unless they can come up with $60,000 in back rent, and they can't. I already checked their financials." The room went silent. Brittany stopped recording. Mom's face went pale. Frank's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "That's not all," I continued, my voice steady now, strong now. "That little coffee shop Mom works at part-time, Coffee Corner, I don't own that building, but I know the woman who does. Her name is Patricia Chen. She's one of my closest friends. Her daughter is my goddaughter. We have brunch every Sunday. One phone call from me and your hours get cut, Mom. One conversation about how this business partner of mine has a toxic employee creating a hostile work environment. Patricia trusts my judgment. She'd listen." I pulled up another screen on my phone. "And Brittany? That apartment complex you just moved into last month? Riverside Gardens? Congratulations on finally moving out of Mom and Frank's house at 23. I'm sure that 2-bedroom feels like luxury after sharing walls with these two for so long." Brittany's eyes widened. "What about it?" I smiled sweetly. "I'm the primary investor in the company that owns it. 40% stake. I don't manage day-to-day operations, but I do sit on the board. We're actually having a meeting next week about which tenants to keep when we do our planned renovations. They're going to raise rents by 30%, and anyone who can't afford it will be asked to leave. I could put your name on the protected list, or I could suggest that Unit 237 would be perfect for renovation first. Your lease allows for termination with 60 days' notice if renovations are needed." The words hung in the air like smoke. I watched their faces change as they realized what I was telling them. In 5 years, I hadn't just survived. I hadn't just escaped. I had built an empire, and I had accidentally, coincidentally, without even planning it, built that empire in a way that gave me power over their lives. "You're lying," Frank said, but his voice lacked conviction. I shook my head. "I'm not. Call Salvatore himself if you don't believe me. Ask him who owns the building. Ask him who's been sending the foreclosure notices. The name on the paperwork is Richardson Capital Holdings. That's my company. I named it after myself. The surname you always said I didn't deserve to carry because I wasn't really part of this family. Turns out you were right about that. I'm not part of this family. I'm better than this family. Mom finally spoke, and for the first time I heard something other than coldness in her voice. I heard fear. Maya, honey, let's not be hasty. We can talk about this. We can work this out. I shook my head slowly. No, Mom, we can't. You had 17 years to work things out. 17 years to protect me, to choose me, to love me. And you never did. Not once. Every bruise, every cruel word, every night I cried myself to sleep wondering what was wrong with me, wondering why I wasn't good enough for my own mother to love. You let it all happen. I turned toward the door, ready to leave, ready to walk away from this family forever. But Brittany's voice stopped me. Wait, just wait. Why are you doing this? We're family. I turned back and looked at her, really looked at her. She seemed smaller somehow, younger, scared. Family doesn't hurt each other the way you've hurt me, I said. Family doesn't film someone being choked and laugh about it. Family doesn't lie about cancer to lure someone home just to punish them. You're not my family, Brittany. You never were. You were the golden child, and I was the scapegoat, and that's all we'll ever be to each other. I reached for the door handle, but Frank moved to block my way. His size had always intimidated me before, but now I just felt tired of being afraid of him, tired of giving him power over me. Move, I said quietly. He didn't budge. You think you can come in here, threaten us, and just leave? You think you're so special now with your money and your big city life? You're nothing, Maya. You'll always be nothing. I looked up at him, and I didn't see a monster anymore. I saw a sad, angry man who'd spent his life making other people feel small because he felt small himself. I see you, Frank, I said. I see exactly what you are. You're a bully. You're weak. And the only power you have is the power I give you by being afraid. But I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not 17. I'm not helpless. And if you don't move out of my way right now, I'm calling the police and pressing charges for assault. There are bruises on my throat. Brittany filmed it. That's evidence. You'll go to jail. Something shifted in his eyes. Maybe he saw that I meant it. Maybe he realized that the scared girl he used to terrorize had been replaced by a woman who knew her worth, who knew her rights, who had resources and lawyers and people who would believe her. He stepped aside. I walked past him, past my mother, who still hadn't moved from the kitchen doorway, past Brittany, who was staring at her phone like it held all the answers. I opened the door and stepped out into the evening air. It was raining lightly, that soft Oregon rain that feels like mist. I breathed it in. It smelled like freedom. Maya, wait, Mom called from behind me. Please, we need to talk about this. I paused on the porch steps, but I didn't turn around. There's nothing to talk about, I said. You made your choices. I'm making mine. My choice is to never see any of you again. But what about Salvatore's? Frank's voice, desperate now. That's Giuseppe's life. He's a good man. His family owns that restaurant. Please. I did turn around then. I looked at the three of them standing in the doorway of that small, sad house. You should have thought about that before you put your hands on me, I said. You should have thought about consequences before you decided to hurt me one more time. Every action has a consequence. You taught me that, Frank, remember? Every time I did something you didn't like, there were consequences. Well, now it's your turn. I turned and walked to my car. I could hear Mom crying. I could hear Brittany saying something urgent and angry. I could hear Frank yelling. I didn't care. I got in my Mercedes, started the engine, and I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I watched that house get smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. It felt like driving away from a grave. I drove to a hotel in Portland instead of flying home immediately. I needed time to process what had just happened. I sat in the hotel room, looking at the city lights, touching the bruises on my throat that were already turning purple. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt powerful. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad for the little girl I used to be, who so desperately wanted her mother's love. Sad that I'd wasted even one more second hoping these people would change. Sad that I'd had to become successful to feel like I mattered when I should have mattered just because I existed. I called Dr. Chen. It was late, but she told me I could call any time. She answered on the third ring. Maya, what's wrong? I told her everything. The text message, the fake cancer, Frank's hands around my throat, Brittany filming, Mom's silence, the confrontation, everything. When I finished, there was a long pause. How do you feel? Dr. Chen finally asked. I don't know, I admitted. I thought I'd feel better. I thought confronting them would give me closure. But I just feel empty. That's normal, she said gently. You went there hoping for an apology, and instead you got more abuse. That's re-traumatizing. The fact that you were able to stand up for yourself is huge, Maya. The fact that you didn't collapse, that you told them the truth about what they did to you, that's growth. But growth doesn't erase pain. It just means you're learning to carry it differently. We talked for an hour. She reminded me that healing isn't linear, that setbacks happen, that going back to your childhood home is one of the hardest things a trauma survivor can do, that I hadn't failed, that I was brave. By the time we hung up, I felt a little better. Not good, but better. I stayed in Portland for 3 days. I didn't go back to that house. Instead, I drove around the city, visiting places I'd always wanted to see when I lived in Oregon, but never had the money or the time. I went to Powell's Books and spent 4 hours getting lost in the stacks. I went to the Japanese garden and sat by the koi pond watching the fish swim in lazy circles. I went to Voodoo Donuts and bought a box of weird flavors just because I could. I was trying to reclaim this place, trying to create new memories that weren't soaked in pain. On the third day, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maya Richardson? A man's voice said. This is Giuseppe Moretti from Salvatore's restaurant. I need to talk to you. My stomach tightened. How did you get my number? Through the property management company, he said. I told them it was urgent. Please, I need 10 minutes of your time. I can come to you. I hesitated, then gave him the address of a coffee shop near my hotel. 30 minutes later, I watched a man in his 60s walk through the door, looking around nervously. Giuseppe Moretti was exactly what you'd picture for a man who'd run an Italian restaurant for 40 years. Round belly, warm eyes, flour still on his black pants like he'd come straight from the kitchen. He spotted me and walked over. Miss Richardson? I nodded. He sat down across from me without waiting for an invitation. Please, he said. Please don't foreclose. My restaurant is my life. My father opened Salvatore's in 1982. I've run it since he died 20 years ago. My daughter works there, my nephew. We're family. I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti, I said carefully, but you're 3 months behind on rent. That's $60,000. I have a business to run. I understand that, he said quickly, and I take full responsibility. The truth is, my wife got sick last year. Cancer. Real cancer. Not like whatever lie brought you back here. The medical bills were devastating, even with insurance. I had to choose between paying rent and paying for her treatment. I chose her. I would make that choice again. But she's better now. She's in remission. And I have a plan to catch up. I've been approved for a small business loan. I can pay you $40,000 by the end of next week. The other $20,000 I can pay in installments over 6 months. Please, I'm begging you. Don't take my father's legacy. Don't put my family on the street. I stared at this man who was begging me for mercy, while my own family had shown me none. Why should I believe you? I asked, but my voice wasn't hard. I'm just supposed to take your word that you'll pay? He pulled out a folder from inside his jacket and slid it across the table. This is the loan approval letter. This is my wife's medical records. This is a payment plan I had my accountant draw up. And this is a letter from every single one of my employees asking you to reconsider. They wrote about what the restaurant means to them, what working there has meant to their families. I didn't tell them to do it. They did it on their own when they heard about the foreclosure. I opened the folder. The loan approval was legitimate. The medical records were real. The payment plan was detailed and realistic. And the letters, there were 12 of them, each one handwritten, each one talking about Giuseppe like he was family. This man, this stranger, had more character references than my own mother could probably write for me. I closed the folder and looked at him. Mr. Moretti, do you know Frank Richardson? Giuseppe's face darkened. I know Frank, he said carefully. He and his wife come in every Friday. He's not a pleasant man. He's rude to my staff. He complains about prices while ordering the most expensive items. He drinks too much and gets loud. Honestly, if I wasn't desperate for every customer, I would have banned him years ago. Why? I smiled slightly. Just curious. Tell me something. If you knew that not paying rent would result in foreclosure, if you knew you might lose everything, why didn't you come to me sooner? Why wait until now? He looked down at his hands. Shame, he admitted. Pride, fear. My father taught me that a man pays his debts. The fact that I couldn't, the fact that I had to choose between my wife's life and my business, it killed me. I thought I could fix it before it got to this point. I was wrong. I appreciated his honesty. I appreciated that he didn't make excuses. He just told me the truth. I made a decision. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to pay me $40,000 by the end of next week, like you promised. The remaining $20,000? Consider it forgiven. Giuseppe's eyes went wide. What? Why would you do that? Because your wife had cancer, and you chose her, I said simply. Because you employed 12 people who wrote letters defending you. Because you're a good man who got dealt a bad hand, and you're trying to do the right thing. And because, I paused, because I want to take something good from this trip. I want to help someone who deserves it instead of hurting people who deserve it. Giuseppe stood up abruptly and came around the table. Before I could react, he hugged me, this stranger, and I could feel him shaking. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. You saved my life. When he finally let go, there were tears on his cheeks. I have to ask, he said. Why did you buy that building? Why invest here when you live in Seattle? Coincidence, I said. Random investment opportunity. My business partner found the listing. The numbers made sense. I didn't even know it was near my hometown until after we closed. He nodded slowly. Then he said something that surprised me. Your family doesn't deserve you. I blinked. What? Frank Richardson, Giuseppe said. Every Friday he brags about his daughter Brittany. How smart she is, how successful she is, how proud he is. But he never mentions you. His wife doesn't either. I only know about you because one night Frank got really drunk and started ranting about his worthless stepdaughter who ran away and thought she was too good for her family. He called you terrible names. My staff felt uncomfortable. I should have thrown him out that night. I'm sorry I didn't. I felt something crack open in my chest. This man, this stranger, was apologizing to me for not defending me when my own family never had. Thank you for telling me that, I said quietly. For what it's worth, Giuseppe said, sitting back down. Whatever Frank says about you, it's not true. Any woman who can build what you've built, who can show mercy when she doesn't have to, who can forgive a debt when she's legally entitled to collect it, that's not a worthless person. That's a person of character. We talked for another hour. He told me about Salvatore's, about his father's dream, about the community the restaurant had created. He invited me to come for dinner anytime, said it would be on the house, for life. I told him I'd think about it. When we finally parted ways, I felt something I hadn't felt since I'd arrived in Oregon. I felt like maybe this trip wasn't a complete waste. Maybe I couldn't heal my relationship with my family of origin, but maybe I could build new relationships with people who actually deserved my time. I flew back to Seattle the next morning. As the plane took off, I looked down at Oregon, disappearing beneath the clouds, and I made myself a promise. I would never go back. Not for holidays, not for emergencies, not for funerals. I was done hoping that Frank would apologize. Done hoping that Mom would suddenly realize she'd failed me. Done hoping that Brittany would see me as something other than competition. They had shown me exactly who they were, and this time I was going to believe them. My phone buzzed as we reached cruising altitude, a text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was Brittany. The message said, "You can't just abandon your family like this. We deserve better." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I typed my response. I stared at Brittany's text for a long time. "You can't just abandon your family like this. We deserve better." The audacity of those words, the absolute delusion. I typed my response carefully, weighing each word. "You're right. You do deserve better. You deserve a family that takes responsibility for their actions. You deserve a mother who protects all her children, not just the one who looks like her second husband. You deserve a father figure who doesn't solve problems with violence. But that's not what you have, Brittany, and it's not what I have either. The difference is I finally accepted it. Maybe someday you will too." I hit send, and then I blocked her number. Then I blocked Mom's number. Then I blocked Frank's number. I blocked them on social media, on email, everywhere. I created a barrier between their world and mine, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. When I got back to my apartment in Seattle, my best friend Jasmine was waiting. She had a key for emergencies, and apparently my radio silence for 3 days qualified as an emergency. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything, every detail, the fake cancer, the assault, the filming, the confrontation, Giuseppe and Salvatore's, all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "I'm proud of you." I looked at her, confused. Proud? I just threatened to destroy their lives. "Jazz, I became exactly what I was afraid of becoming. I became cruel." Jasmine shook her head firmly. "No, you set boundaries. There's a difference. They hurt you again, after you gave them a chance. You didn't go there looking for revenge. You went there hoping for healing. They chose violence. You chose to protect yourself. That's not cruel, Maya. That's survival." We talked late into the night. Jasmine reminded me of all the work I'd done in therapy, all the progress I'd made. She reminded me that I'd built a life worth living, surrounded by people who actually loved me. She reminded me that chosen family is just as real as blood family, maybe more real, because it's based on mutual respect and care instead of obligation and guilt. By the time she left, I felt steadier, not healed, but steadier. I took a shower, washing off the feeling of that house, and then I went to bed in my own space, in my own home, surrounded by things I'd worked hard to earn. I was safe, I was free, and I was done apologizing for it. The next morning I woke up to 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. My blocks hadn't worked on everything because some of the messages were coming from numbers I didn't recognize. Family, friends, distant relatives, people I hadn't heard from in years. The messages all said basically the same thing. "How dare you threaten Frank and your mother? How dare you use your money to bully them? How could you be so cruel to the people who raised you? Family is everything, and you're throwing it away over grudges from childhood. Grow up, forgive, move on." I read each message with a strange sense of detachment. These people had never once reached out when I was 17 and homeless. They'd never asked why I left. They'd never questioned the story they were told. They just accepted that I was the bad one, the difficult one, the one who caused problems. And now, years later, they were coming out of the woodwork to defend my abusers. It would have hurt if I hadn't already learned this lesson 1,000 times before. People believe what's comfortable. The truth is rarely comfortable. I deleted every message and blocked every number. I wasn't going to defend myself to people who had already decided I was guilty. But then I got a call that I did answer. It was from Patricia Chen, the woman who owned Coffee Corner where my mother worked. Patricia was in her 50s, a sharp businesswoman who'd immigrated from Taiwan 30 years ago and built a small empire of coffee shops and bakeries through sheer determination and smart investing. We'd met at a real estate investment conference 2 years ago and bonded immediately. She was like the mother I wished I'd had, warm but honest, supportive but not coddling. "Maya," she said when I answered, "we need to talk about your mother." I felt my stomach drop. "What about her?" Patricia's voice was careful. She came to me yesterday asking for extra shifts, said she needed money urgently. When I asked why, she broke down crying and told me that her daughter was trying to destroy the family, that you own the building where her husband's favorite restaurant operates, and you're foreclosing just to hurt them. She said you were always vindictive, even as a child. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. "Patricia," I said quietly, "can I tell you the truth?" "Please," she said. "I want to hear your side." So I told her. I told her about growing up as the scapegoat, about Frank's violence, about Mom's silence, about the fake cancer and the assault 3 days ago. I sent her photos of the bruises on my throat. I told her about Giuseppe and why I was foreclosing and how I'd actually ended up forgiving part of his debt. I told her everything. When I finished, Patricia was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, in a voice tight with anger, "I'm so sorry, Maya. I'm so sorry you went through that. And I'm sorry your mother tried to manipulate me into punishing you for protecting yourself. She's fired. I can't have someone like that representing my business." "Wait," I said quickly. "Patricia, I'm not asking you to fire her." "I know you're not," Patricia said, "but I'm doing it anyway. Not because you asked, because she lied to me, because she tried to use our friendship to hurt you, because I have a daughter too, and if anyone hurt her the way your family hurt you, I'd burn the world down. Your mother doesn't get to work for me anymore. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. This wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to destroy their lives. I just wanted them to leave me alone. But it seemed like the universe had other plans. Over the next week, things escalated in ways I couldn't have predicted. Salvatore's stayed open because Giuseppe paid the $40,000 he owed, and I formally forgave the remaining $20,000 in writing. He was so grateful he put a plaque in the restaurant lobby that said, "Thank you to Maya Richardson and Richardson Capital Holdings for believing in small businesses and family legacies." I told him it wasn't necessary, but he insisted, said he wanted everyone to know what I'd done. The plaque went up on a Friday. Frank and Mom showed up for their usual Friday dinner that same night. According to Giuseppe, who called me laughing, Frank saw the plaque and went absolutely ballistic, started yelling about how I was trying to humiliate him. Giuseppe told him to leave and never come back. Frank apparently tried to argue, but Giuseppe had 4 line cooks and 2 waiters escort him out. Said he'd call the police if Frank ever set foot in the restaurant again. "Your stepfather's been coming to my restaurant for 15 years, Giuseppe told me, and in 1 week you've done more good than he's ever done. That plaque stays up forever." I didn't know what to say. Thank you seemed inadequate. Mom losing her job at Coffee Corner spread through the small business community like wildfire because Patricia Chen was respected and well-connected. When other business owners asked why she'd fired someone, Patricia didn't lie. She said the employee had misrepresented a family situation to try to manipulate business relationships, and Patricia didn't tolerate dishonesty. It was professional and vague enough that she wasn't gossiping, but clear enough that people understood. Mom's reputation in town was damaged. She started applying to other coffee shops, other retail stores, but her references weren't strong anymore. She'd worked at Coffee Corner for 8 years. That was her primary work history. Without Patricia's recommendation, she was struggling. And Brittany, the Board meeting for Riverside Gardens happened exactly when I said it would. The renovations were approved, rent increases were set at 30%, and when the property manager asked if there were any tenants we wanted to protect from the increase, I stayed silent. I didn't put Brittany's name forward as someone to protect, but I also didn't single her out for early renovation. I just let the process happen naturally. She got the same 60-day notice that every other tenant got. Her rent was going from $1,200 a month to $1,560 a month. She'd have to decide if she could afford it or if she needed to move. It wasn't personal. It was just business, except it was personal. It was absolutely personal, and I was okay with that. 2 weeks after I got back to Seattle, I got a letter in the mail, an actual physical letter, not an email or a text. It was from Mom. The envelope was addressed in her handwriting, and for a moment I considered throwing it away without opening it. But curiosity won. I opened it carefully, like it might explode. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten on floral stationery that I recognized from my childhood. She used to use that stationery to write thank you notes to people at church. She'd never written me a note in my life. The letter started with an apology. Maya, I'm so sorry for everything that happened when you came home. Frank shouldn't have put his hands on you. I should have stopped him. I should have protected you. I've failed you in so many ways, and I'm finally ready to admit it. I kept reading. She wrote about how hard it had been when she'd gotten pregnant with me, how my father had left, how she'd struggled as a single mother. She wrote about meeting Frank and how he'd seemed like the answer to her prayers, a strong man who could provide stability. She wrote about Brittany's birth and how Frank had made it clear that Brittany was his real daughter and I was just someone he tolerated. She wrote about being afraid of Frank, about walking on eggshells, about choosing to keep the peace rather than protect me because she was scared of being alone again. She wrote about regretting letting me leave at 17, about wondering where I was and if I was okay, about being too proud to reach out. She wrote, I know I can't undo the past. I know I can't give you back your childhood, but I'm asking for a chance to try again, to build something new, to be the mother I should have been all along. Frank and I are separating. I've asked him to move out. He's staying with his brother. I'm going to file for divorce. I'm doing this for me, but I'm also doing it for you, to show you that I choose you. Finally, after all these years, I choose you. Please give me a chance. Please let me try to make this right. The letter was signed, Love Always, Mom. I read it 3 times. Each time I felt something different. The first time, I felt hope. That old, dangerous hope that maybe she meant it. The second time, I felt anger. Where was this letter when I was 17 and sleeping in my car? Where was this courage when Frank was beating me down day after day? The third time, I felt nothing. Just emptiness. Because I realized something important. This letter wasn't about me. It was about her. She wasn't apologizing because she'd had a moral awakening. She was apologizing because she was losing things. Her job, her social standing, her favorite restaurant, her comfortable life. She was apologizing because there were finally consequences to her choices, and she didn't like how those consequences felt. The letter wasn't about making amends. It was about making herself feel better. It was about trying to get me to call off the dogs so her life could go back to normal. I sat down at my desk and I wrote my own letter. I didn't use floral stationery. I used plain white paper and I typed it on my computer. It was professional and cold and exactly what I needed it to be. Mom, I wrote, I received your letter. I've read it multiple times and I've given it serious consideration. Here's my response. I don't forgive you. Not because I'm cruel or vindictive, but because forgiveness requires genuine remorse and changed behavior. Your letter is full of excuses about why you failed me. You were scared. You were overwhelmed. You were trying to keep the peace. But nowhere in your 4 pages did you actually acknowledge the full extent of what you allowed to happen to me. You didn't just fail to protect me from Frank's violence. You participated in my abuse. You told me I was being dramatic when I cried. You sided with him in every argument. You made me feel crazy for having feelings. You let Brittany treat me like garbage while praising her for being such a sweet girl. You told people I was difficult when really I was just traumatized. You took food off my plate and gave it to Frank while telling me I needed to lose weight anyway. You searched my room and destroyed my journals because I needed to learn privacy was a privilege, not a right. You did 1,000 small cruelties that added up to one clear message. I wasn't wanted. I wasn't loved. I didn't matter. That wasn't just failing to protect me from Frank. That was active abuse. And you don't get to paper over that with a 4-page letter blaming your choices on fear. Lots of people are afraid. They don't abuse their children. I continued typing, my fingers moving faster now. You say you're divorcing Frank, and you want that to show me you choose me. But you're not divorcing him because you suddenly realized he's abusive. You're divorcing him because your life got hard and you need someone to blame. If I hadn't come back, if that confrontation hadn't happened, if your social standing wasn't damaged, would you still be leaving him? I don't think so. I think you'd still be sitting across from him at Salvatore's every Friday night, pretending you have a perfect marriage while convincing yourself that the past doesn't matter. You're not choosing me, Mom. You're choosing survival. And you think I'm the path to that survival because I have money and connections now. You think if you apologize and play the reformed mother, I'll make your problems go away. I'll call Patricia and get your job back. I'll tell Giuseppe to let Frank return to the restaurant. I'll make Brittany's rent affordable again. But I won't. Not because I'm cruel, because I'm protecting myself. The letter went on for 3 pages. I told her everything I'd never been able to say as a child. I told her about the nights I'd considered suicide because the pain was so overwhelming. I told her about the years of therapy I'd needed just to function like a normal person. I told her about the relationships I'd sabotaged because I couldn't believe anyone would actually love me. I told her about the success I'd built in spite of her, not because of her. I told her that I hoped she found peace, but that peace wouldn't include me. I ended the letter with this: I'm not your daughter anymore. I haven't been for a long time. I'm a stranger who shares your DNA, and I'm okay with that. I hope someday you'll be okay with it too. Don't contact me again. If you do, I'll file a restraining order. I'm done hoping you'll change. I'm done setting myself on fire to keep you warm. I'm done. Sincerely, Maya Richardson. I printed the letter, signed it, put it in an envelope, and mailed it that same day. Then I called my lawyer and had him draft a formal cease and desist letter to Frank, Mom, and Brittany, stating that any further contact would be considered harassment and would be met with legal action. I wasn't playing games anymore. I wasn't leaving room for negotiation. I was building a wall, and that wall had barbed wire and guard dogs and a very clear no trespassing sign. 3 weeks passed. I threw myself into work. I closed 2 new deals. I hired 3 new analysts for my company. I had dinner with Patricia and her family and played with my goddaughter Emma until we were both exhausted and happy. I went to therapy twice a week instead of once. I journaled, I meditated, I did hot yoga and hated every minute, but kept going because Dr. Chen said physical movement helps process trauma. I was healing, slowly, painfully, but genuinely. And then I got a call from Giuseppe. Maya, he said, his voice strange, you need to come to Salvatore's tonight. Why? I asked. What's wrong? Just trust me, he said. Please, it's important. I almost said no. But Giuseppe had been kind to me when he didn't have to be. He'd shared information about Frank that had validated my experience. So I said yes. I drove to Portland that evening, the 2.5-hour drive giving me too much time to think. When I pulled up to Salvatore's, the parking lot was full. Through the windows, I could see the restaurant was packed. Giuseppe met me at the door. He looked nervous. What's going on? I asked. He gestured inside. Come see. I followed him into the restaurant and immediately understood why he'd called. There was a banner hanging across the dining room that said, Thank you, Maya Richardson. Every table was full, and sitting at those tables were people I recognized: the line cooks from Salvatore's, the waitstaff, Giuseppe's daughter and nephew, but also others: Patricia Chen and her family, the property manager from Riverside Gardens, other small business owners I'd worked with over the years. Jasmine had driven down from Seattle. Even Dr. Chen was there, smiling at me from a corner table. "What is this?" I whispered to Giuseppe. "This is everyone whose life you've touched," he said simply. "When I told people what you did for me, how you forgave that debt, others started sharing their stories too. Patricia told me how you mentored her when she was starting her bakery expansion. James from Riverside Gardens told me you recommended his company for an investment opportunity that changed his business. Your friend Jasmine told me you paid her mother's medical bills last year when she was struggling. Dr. Chen told me, well, she couldn't tell me details because of confidentiality, but she said you were one of her bravest patients and you'd overcome more than most people could imagine. Everyone here wanted to thank you, to show you that you're not alone, that you matter." I felt tears start to fall, and I couldn't stop them. This wasn't what I expected. I'd spent so long being told I was worthless, being told I was the problem, being told I'd never amount to anything, that some part of me still believed it. Even with all my success, even with my money and my business, some part of me still felt like that scared little girl who wasn't good enough for her own mother to love. But looking around this room at all these faces, people who'd shown up on a random Thursday night just to thank me, I felt something shift. Maybe I was good enough. Maybe I'd always been good enough. Maybe the problem was never me. Giuseppe guided me to a table in the center of the room, and people started standing up, one by one, sharing stories. Patricia talked about how I'd given her business advice that had saved her from bankruptcy 3 years ago. James talked about how I'd invested in his company when bigger investors had passed, how that vote of confidence had helped him secure other funding. A woman I barely remembered, someone I'd met at a conference, talked about how I'd stayed late talking to her about commercial real estate when I could have been networking with more important people, and how that conversation had inspired her to start her own investment firm. Jasmine talked about our friendship, about how I'd been there for her through her divorce, through her mother's illness, through every hard moment, story after story, person after person, showing me a version of myself I'd never quite been able to see. When everyone had spoken, Giuseppe stood up. "Maya Richardson," he said formally, "my father taught me that the measure of a person isn't their wealth or their success. It's how they treat people when they have the power to hurt them and choose kindness instead. You had the power to destroy my restaurant. You chose mercy. You had the power to ignore my story. You chose to listen. On behalf of everyone in this room, thank you. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for helping us. Thank you for being exactly who you are." The room erupted in applause. People were standing, cheering, and I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. This was what family felt like. Not blood, not obligation, not guilt, but choice. These people chose to be here. They chose to celebrate me. They chose to see my worth, even when I couldn't see it myself. We ate dinner together, all of us, family style. Giuseppe had prepared a feast. Homemade pasta, fresh bread, wine, desserts. We talked and laughed and told stories. It felt like Thanksgiving, like Christmas, like every holiday I'd ever imagined but never experienced. As the night was winding down, Dr. Chen pulled me aside. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Overwhelmed," I admitted. "Good overwhelmed, I think." She smiled. "This is what I've been trying to tell you in our sessions, Maya. You are loved, you are valued, you matter, not because of what you do or what you achieve, but because of who you are. These people didn't show up tonight because you're successful. They showed up because you're kind, because you're genuine, because when you had the chance to become like your abusers, to use your power to hurt people the way you were hurt, you chose differently. That's character. That's strength." I hugged her tightly. "Thank you," I whispered. for everything, for not giving up on me. I drove back to Seattle that night with a full heart. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was part of something bigger than myself. The validation I'd been seeking from my mother, the approval I'd been craving from Frank, the acceptance I'd been desperate for from Brittany, I didn't need any of it anymore. I had built my own family. I had created my own life, and it was beautiful. 2 months later, I got one final piece of mail from Oregon. It was a legal document. Frank and Mom's divorce had been finalized. The house was being sold. Frank was moving to another state to live with his brother. Mom was moving into a small apartment in town. Brittany had moved back in with Mom because she couldn't afford the rent increase at Riverside Gardens and couldn't find anything else in her budget. The three of them were squeezed into a 2-bedroom apartment, back to where they started, except now they had to face the consequences of their choices without me to blame. I felt nothing looking at these documents. No satisfaction, no vindication, no anger, just nothing. They were strangers now. Their lives were no longer connected to mine. I filed the documents in a folder labeled Family Legal and put it away in a drawer. Then I called Jasmine and asked if she wanted to get dinner. We went to a new Thai restaurant that had just opened downtown. We talked about work and relationships and her daughter's upcoming piano recital. We made plans to go hiking the next weekend. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. It was ordinary and perfect and exactly what I needed. As I was falling asleep that night in my apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built, I thought about that 17-year-old girl sleeping in her car 5 years ago. I thought about how terrified she was, how alone, how certain that she'd never be okay. I wanted to go back and tell her that she would survive this, that she would more than survive. She would thrive. She would build something beautiful out of all that pain. She would find people who loved her. She would learn to love herself. She would be okay. Better than okay. She would be free. I whispered into the darkness, to that girl I used to be, to every version of myself that had suffered and survived. We made it. We're home. Not the home we were born into, but the home we built. And nobody can ever take that away from us. I fell asleep smiling. The nightmares that used to plague me every night were gone. In their place were dreams of the future, of possibilities, of a life lived on my own terms, surrounded by people who chose to love me, who saw my worth, who celebrated my existence instead of tolerating it. 6 months after that dinner at Salvatore's, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Giuseppe's daughter Maria was getting married, and she wanted me there, not as a business associate, as family. I attended the wedding with Jasmine and Patricia. We sat together during the ceremony and cried happy tears as Maria and her fiancé exchanged vows. At the reception, Giuseppe pulled me onto the dance floor. "You know what my father used to say?" he asked as we danced to some Frank Sinatra song. "What?" He said, "The family you're born into teaches you how to live, but the family you choose teaches you how to love. You taught my family how to love better, Maya. You showed us that kindness matters, that mercy matters, that people are more important than money. Thank you for that gift." I hugged him tight. "Thank you for seeing me," I said, "for believing me, for being the father figure I never had." He patted my back. "Anytime you need a family dinner, you come to Salvatore's. That's your table in the corner. It's always reserved for you. Always." I danced with Patricia. I danced with Jasmine. I danced with Maria and told her how beautiful she looked. I danced with Dr. Chen and thanked her again for saving my life through therapy. I danced until my feet hurt and my face hurt from smiling. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of love. Not the erasure of trauma, but the building of something new on top of the ruins. I had learned that you can't make people love you. You can't force your mother to choose you. You can't make your stepfather stop being violent. You can't make your sister see you as a person instead of competition. But you can choose yourself. You can protect yourself. You can build boundaries. You can walk away. And on the other side of that walking away, you might find something even better than what you lost. You might find yourself. 3 years have passed since I boarded that first flight home. 3 years since Frank put his hands on my throat. 3 years since I walked away from that family forever. In those 3 years, I've doubled my net worth. I've expanded my business into 3 new cities. I've mentored 12 women in commercial real estate investment. I've funded scholarships for kids aging out of foster care because I know what it's like to be young and alone with no safety net. I bought a house, a real house with a garden and a big kitchen and enough bedrooms for guests. Jasmine and her daughter stay over sometimes. Patricia comes for Sunday brunch. Giuseppe brings cannoli from the restaurant. Dr. Chen comes for tea, and we talk about things other than trauma, books and travel and the future. I've built a life that 17-year-old girl sleeping in her car couldn't have imagined. And every day I wake up grateful. Grateful that I survived. Grateful that I didn't let their cruelty make me cruel. Grateful that I chose healing over hatred. I still have hard days, days where the old wounds ache, days where I wonder what my life would have been like if my mother had loved me the way I needed, days where I'm angry at everything I lost. But those days are fewer now, and when they come, I have people to call, people who remind me of my worth, people who chose me. Last week I got an email from Brittany. She'd found my business email somehow, gotten around the blocks. The subject line said, "Please read." I almost deleted it. But curiosity won again. The email was long and rambling. She talked about how hard life had been since I left, how Mom was depressed all the time, how Frank had become even more angry and bitter, how living in that small apartment was suffocating, how she'd applied to 50 jobs and couldn't get hired anywhere because small towns talk and everyone knew about the family drama. She said she understood now why I left. She said she was sorry for not seeing it before. She said she wanted to start over, to build a relationship, to be real sisters. She asked if I could help her get a job in Seattle. Said she wanted to escape like I did. Said she needed me. I read the email twice. Then I closed my laptop and I didn't respond. Because I'd learned something important over the past 3 years. Not everyone who asks for help deserves it. Not everyone who apologizes has earned forgiveness. Some people only reach out when they need something, when their life gets hard and they remember you exist. They don't want a relationship, they want a rescue. And I wasn't in the business of rescuing people who'd watched me drown and did nothing. Brittany had her chance to be my sister. She had 17 years of chances. She chose to be Frank's golden child instead. She chose to film my assault instead of stopping it. She chose to laugh at my pain instead of defending me. Those choices have consequences. I couldn't save her from them even if I wanted to. And I didn't want to. That probably makes me sound cold. Maybe I am cold. Or maybe I've just learned that compassion for yourself sometimes means refusing compassion for others. That protecting your peace sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their choices. That you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, even when those people are begging for matches. I'm writing this story down because my therapist suggested it might help other people, other scapegoats who think they're crazy, other survivors who think they deserved the abuse, other people who are stuck in toxic families and can't see a way out. I want you to know that there is a way out. It's hard. It's scary. You might have to sleep in your car. You might have to work 3 jobs. You might have to go to therapy for years. You might have to build your life from absolute zero. But you can do it. You can survive. You can thrive. You can build something beautiful out of the ashes of your childhood. And when you do, when you're finally free and safe and surrounded by people who actually love you, you'll realize something important. You were never the problem. You were never too much or not enough. You were never unlovable or worthless or defective. You were just a child in a situation where the adults failed you. And that wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. So to every scapegoat reading this, to every person who's been told they're the problem, to every survivor who's still fighting to believe they deserve better, you do. You deserve safety. You deserve love. You deserve people who choose you. You deserve to build boundaries. You deserve to walk away. You deserve to protect your peace. You deserve happiness. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself. Not your mother, not your father, not your siblings, not anyone. Choose yourself. Choose healing. Choose freedom. And when you do, when you're on the other side of all that pain, remember to reach back. Remember to help the next person who's still trapped. Remember to be the person you needed when you were drowning. That's how we break the cycle. That's how we heal. Not just ourselves, but each other. My name is Maya Richardson. I'm 27 years old. I own a $42 million real estate portfolio. I have a chosen family that loves me. I have a life worth living. And I got all of that by doing the hardest thing I've ever done. I walked away from people who didn't deserve me, and I never looked back.